I'm Inserto, and this is Coffee Talk.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Coffee Talk. I'm Kim Perlak. I'm the chair of the guitar department here with you today. And as usual, we are joined by Assistant Chair Sheryl Bailey. Hey, Sheryl.
Hey, I got my frothy mix here. Very excited in the
Ooh.
old school Berklee Guitar Department mug, the original.
Yes, and if you can't see because you're listening, I have the new school Berklee Guitar Department coffee mug, which, by the way, you can get now online at the Berklee bookstore or in person. And Cheryl's got our original black New Yorker guitar mug. Thanks, Sheryl. And we're also joined as usual by our senior coordinator, Ben Cody. Hey, Ben, good morning.
Morning.
Good. And we are kicking off a new season of Coffee Talk, and we are really thrilled to have our special guest, Inserto, who is the acting chair, assistant chair of Jazz Comp and Harmony. Hey, Ein.
Hey, Kim, thanks for having me. I do have a mug. This is the professional writing division mug. So I'm not drinking coffee, I'm drinking tea, but forgive me for that. Tea talk.
I love it. That was our first question, actually. First of all, I'm really impressed that the professional writing division has a mug.
Well, it's actually when we used to do convocations, they would always come up with some sort of gift for, the faculty and the staff. And for some reason, it involves a variety of like drinking ware. I even have here this sort of like beer mug kind of situation, and we have champagne glasses. So this is not available for purchase, but some reason this whole collection of mugs and drinkware and even bags and whatnot. So it's since the pandemic we've not had this, but I do miss like the swag, if you will.
I love that. Back in the day, Sheryl, you may remember this from your faculty days, but when performance had a convocation, Matt Marvulio, who was our dean back then, he had a mug made, and on the front it said performance division, and on the back it said go home and practice. And you could decide which side was available, to be seen by the public. Maybe we should bring those back. That sounds pretty good. So that was going to be our next question. What you kind of led with is like, it's coffee talk. So are you a coffee drinker or never a coffee drinker? Like, what's your relationship to coffee and tea?
So the sad thing is I can't really drink coffee. I'm one of these people who's caffeine sensitive. So if I have coffee like at 10 a.m., I'll be up till 4 a.m. type of situation. The main times that I drink coffee is if I'm traveling. So the jet lag situation, and also in countries where I like the coffee. So if I'm in Italy and a little bit of an espresso or a cappuccino, not afternoon. They'll get mad at you about that one, and never with pizza. That's the whole nother story. But yeah, I am not. I'm not, and the reason I'm drinking tea is just because it's winter and it just helps my throat. But otherwise, I'm not even a tea drinker.
You
So.
share this in common with our director of Berklee College of Music, Ron Savage. He
Mm.
only drinks coffee in Italy, and he has a whole monologue about it that you can hear on his episode of Coffee Talk. But that's a good conversation. I think you guys would definitely bond over that for sure.
Yeah, I've traveled with Ron to Paris before for auditions and stuff like that, but the coffee part didn't come up in that one. Other sort of beverages did though. So
I love that.
Well, Paris is
So
good at some beverages over others, I think.
most definitely.
good point. And one of the things that people listen to this podcast for is when they're coming to Berklee for the first time in different capacities, they're thinking about their first days. And so we started asking everyone to share some moments you remember about a first day you had, and you have had different first days because you've had different positions here. And so it
Yeah.
doesn't matter which one or if there's a few things that stand out to you when you were in different roles. But is there anything that comes to mind right away when you think about your first days at Berklee?
It's One of the most interesting things about I didn't go here, but my first day at Berklee would be um, as actually well, I can actually go way, 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 way back. But I did do they used to have like the week in LA situation during the summer program, and it was like before it became like the I think now the focus had become more on songwriting and production, but before I used to be like a compressed 5 week into 1 week. And I just remember being so excited about that and just getting down. And I think I was in awe of just all of these other musicians kind of my age and just like we're here and learning like the first time I learned like AB voicing. So I was like, wow, just blew my mind coming from like a sort of more classical background, but
Mm.
loving jazz and stuff. So that was a fun first day. And then, my first day teaching here, I got hired. I got hired the Friday before school started. So not knowing anything what's going on the culture, but I will say that my colleagues and the chair at the time was or rather acting chair, interim chair, the terms are always weird. Jamal Holland was very kind and had me get oriented, and I think the thing that makes it different from teaching at other schools is they have so many resources for you right off the bat. Here, you're going to teach this class. Here's everything laid out where you don't get that at other places. And then I guess my first day as assistant chair is, oh, look at those emails. Look at all those emails. And yeah, just, but I think the thing I did enjoy, we had to do what you call like the scheduling event. So these are entering students who had just come or haven't been placed or whatever in the right place. I love meeting new students. I love that. It's just like they're like excited, some of them a little scared. I'm like, you're just gonna have a blast. You're gonna have a good time. You're gonna learn about music. I mean, how horrible is that? Not at all. So it's always about meeting new students. I think it's always a great first day situation, if you will.
Yeah, there's a lot in what you said. And I think one thing that's kind of fun is that three of us in this quartet on this hang today were assistant chairs or former assistant chairs. Like that was my role when I first came in, and Sheryl is an assistant chair. And it is really fun. It is quite a shock when you see the amount of incoming every day, and whether it's an email or in person, it is quite something. And I think we also share, and Sheryl, you can jump in on this too, how much we love the first day of meeting everybody who comes in and just kind of getting to be that person that says like, yeah, you're kind of in this incredible place now. Because you're absolutely right. That's what struck me about Berklee too, was that there's actually resources for everything we say we care about in music. It's as though, that we were allowed as the people who teach the subjects and run the departments to say like, what would be like a dream situation for a student, and try to get all those things. Go ahead,
I was just gonna jump in and say I remember my first day with you was doing auditions, and you were kind of shadowing me a little bit, and then we find out that we had a friend in common, Colin Stack. So that's another fun thing I think about music or Berklee is like you're just like you're like not even 6 degrees of separation is like two, so that's always a joy.
I remember that now. It was Boston auditions, and I think you were with John Marasco or Mark White or someone who had been here a long time. And I went to learn how to do auditions because they were going to send me on the road. So they put me with you all day to learn how to do it. That's how we met. That's right. Wow. Yeah, that's great. And Sheryl, you share some of this same thing because you had taught here for a long time and then came in to a chair role as assistant chair.
Yeah, and actually, I met you doing auditions too. I think we were in Puerto Rico, and you were so cool and you were so friendly, and we had a blast. And I was like, and because I taught guitar here, and I was kind of siloed in a way because I would commute from New York, so I didn't get to see a lot of people. And I remember I loved those trips because I would meet people across the college, and you were one of the coolest people I met. I was like, oh yeah, this is great. I like this. This is fun.
I remember when we would, yeah, I don't do this as much as I should, but then finding Sheryl at the gym and just being put to shame, that's the memory.
Well, you busted me now.
I love that. Well, we need to keep our strength up. Let me just say, we need we need to stay healthy as musicians. So okay, this brings me to something that I was thinking about as you were just talking about these first days, Ein, is that you're a pianist. And as you mentioned, you studied classical piano. And now, when people know you as a musician, they know you as an arranger, primarily of large ensemble jazz works in a very masterful way. And I'm wondering if you could talk about and that transition for you, like how what you saw as things that were great in your foundation, and then how you kind of took this path to expanding what you did to where you are now musically.
I think for a lot of us sometimes, especially in music, you don't know where you're going to end up, or you end up where you don't think that you're going to end up. Like I wanted to be like a pop star singing backup for, some like Madonna or something. And to the fact that I ended up in jazz is a very, very, very different journey, if you will. And because I'm originally from Singapore, and so coming here to the US was the exposure to jazz. My only exposure to jazz before that was like Manhattan Transfer, was how I learned about jazz, which is, it's great and awesome way of coming into it. And then so ended up in California. I ended up taking band as like my third elective, and I didn't know what I would do in band as a pianist, but they put me in there, of course, because anyone that marks band. And then I look over at like the bells, like the glockenspiel. I'm like, that looks like piano. I can fake my way through that. And that's like really how it happened. And I ended up in percussion and sort of like self-taught jazz, if you will, until I did that time at Berklee where I got more information. Then I started to take lessons, and primarily an instrumentalist, and I got really good at sight reading. So I do like a lot of theater gigs. I do all sorts of gigs, and while I was in high school and the first couple of years of college, so yeah, but I always wrote stuff. I think all of us always write, like try to compose and that sort of a thing. And then, but past that, it wasn't, I started to write for my college big band, and then took like one arranging class, and then ended up in New England Conservatory, focusing on jazz composition, and primarily I was studying with Bob Brookmeyer, and then that became my thing. And it's weird that I have people in California who know me as a pianist, who know me as somebody who was in drum corps and actually instructed, and so know me as a percussionist. And then the folks nowadays will be, I'm a composer, mainly of big band, but I'm a jazz composer, jazz. So it's just very strange. And I do try to play when I can. Obviously, if like trying to devote yourself to a craft, it's hard to split things up, and especially like having like this job too. All our musical opportunities, sometimes can be few and far in between, and we definitely cherish those. But the transition, I think, was just, I ended up where I used to practice, 8 hours a day, and then ended up slowly going into writing 8 hours a day. So,
Can I roll that back? That really stuck out to me. You were interested in arranging in high school. You decided to do an arrangement, and what's cool is that your teacher was open to that. I mean, you obviously, I can't even imagine thinking about that when I was in high school. Like, oh, what was your inspired you, or what was the tune, and when you went to your teacher, were they just kind of blown away that you wanted to do that? It's kind of amazing.
well, when I was in high school, it was weird because we didn't really have somebody, it was like mainly like marching band and like winter percussion. And I was in drum and bugle corps. So we called them the front line ensemble. So the percussions, percussionist, like with all of the like marimbas and vibes and stuff like that. I ended up doing the arrangements for those initially, and then starting to write for percussion ensemble, because it's weird. Like where I was mainly like if you were a percussionist, you were a drummer, and I don't mean that like in a bad sense, but being a pianist, and just sort of like understanding, you know, a little bit more harmonic background. They let me do it. And then I got hired even while I was in high school to do some of these other ones. And then I tried to do some arrangements for big band. Didn't quite work out as well. It's more in college that was better. But I remember I did I did an arrangement of It Came Upon a Midnight Clear in like jazzy 3/4 waltz, and I, you know, of course put in Jingle Bells and the shout, you know, like everybody else does. But I think it's just really great to be around folks who encourage you and allow you to experiment, you know, and trust you to do that. That's a really, really great thing. And I think that's a great thing about here. It's like, you know, we have such a large variety of student population, and if we give them a chance or the tools, it's like, whoa, like you didn't know how to do this like 3 months ago and now you're mastering it. That's insane. So, you know, it's a beautiful thing here. Definitely, like anybody with potential, like if we give them the chance and they can figure it out, why not?
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. You know, one of the things I really love about jazz composition is that it must be a balance for you as an arranger, composer. You have your own sense of, you know, what you want to hear, what your sense of the piece is, you know, as an artist, as the person writing it. And then there are these considerations you have for the different instruments, like how you write for each one, how they blend, what the timbres are, what the part should be. And then you also are choosing your players. Like you have an orchestra really of players that often plays your music, and they're players that you know, and then there's some room for them to spontaneously compose sometimes, I would imagine, you know, in the arrangement to improvise. How do you think about arranging from that standpoint when you're balancing all of those elements? Like, how do you think of it as an artist?
It's obviously not easy. Yeah. You have 17 people and you're like, I remember once just talking to somebody who's not a musician, and like I was like, they're like, oh, you have a band? I'm like, yeah, I have a band. And then they're like, how many people in the band? I'm like, 17. They're like, oh, that's a big band. I'm like, it is a big band. But no, definitely my style is especially after studying with Brookmeyer, is very melody focused. As a pianist, and I think most composers initially, because none of us really come from a background where we started composing. Most of us started on an instrument, and with that instrument, most of us have instruction. But composition, a lot of us are like, oh, I hear this way, I'm just going to try it this way. But there can be a formality to it and a process to it. And so mine is sort of melody based initially, and anything that I write, I want to think that I can reduce it down to a lead sheet. And then everything on top of that is sort of like textures or transitions, ways in linking one idea to the next. Motivic development is very important to me. And to me, sometimes they're just two melodies, the one on top and the one on the bottom. Who cares what goes on in the middle? Um, you know, initially as the pianist, I didn't think that way. I'm like thinking, okay, these cool chords will go with this cool melody, and here's like this really awesome, like ostinato and whatever. The groove is more important, but that's not my thinking. So the process initially is melody and based, and then after that the textures come in. But I will say, just because how I'm able to hear things, and I'm sure the same thing is for you on guitar, like you can hear something already in your head because you're so familiar with the instrument and even the feel of it. And so the same thing is like if I'm imagining putting something within a certain context, because I can already hear the sound or timbres of those instruments in my head. It's because I'm very familiar with them. I know where I'm going to put it. So I'm just old. I've just done this many times. That's really all it is. It's a lot of experience. um, which makes me marvel at my students who do like go from like zero to like 80 in like 2 years. Is like wow, it's super cool. But hopefully I'm helping them with the tools, and that's part of it, where I will admit that at their age I didn't have those that guidance, you know. I didn't really have it till later. And so, but I got to experiment, I guess. I don't know. I'm not even sure I answered your question.
No, I'm going back to a couple things. Like, do you feel that there's something about your sound as a composer that's distinctive to you that might have been like a kind of developed as unique to you, or maybe a departure from some of the people you studied with?
Yeah, I mean, the scary part is like I've gotten to the point I'm like, is it okay that I copy myself or I sound like myself? Because you're thinking like I'm trying to create something new. I'm like, I created a lot of new. Like, can I just create me? You know what I'm saying? Like, that sounds like me. I'm like, crap. And so I do want to try to keep it fresh. I will say that, and sometimes try to depart. But I'm like, sometimes, man, I'm like, yeah, this is my sound. Can I just keep my sound?
Yeah, I think you can. Yeah, that's great. And then how much does it is it influenced piece to piece when if you know kind of who you're writing for, like you know that you're going to have a certain musician in the ensemble, does that influence you in a certain way?
Yeah. I've been writing sometimes for like guest artists, if you will. Pardon me. And so like I have a project right now that's coming up where I'm writing for Sean Jones, and I haven't. And it's interesting because lately he's been a lot of like either a featured artist or a sideman. Obviously like a big grand sideman, if you will. But I was thinking about it, and it was like him playing other people's music. But because I'm going to do something that really, really is honing in on, and like the last couple of weeks, I've just been listening to his albums. I'm trying to like absorb his essence, if you will, and then try to create something for him that's a real big vehicle, and then still have the Einisms in there. But like we have an upcoming show actually at the Regatta Bar with the Jazz Composers Workshop Orchestra will open for my band. So it's like two big bands, if you will. One night of two big bands. The whole place is going to explode. It's going to explode more because George Garzon is playing with both of the bands, and so with George, I've written a lot of stuff for him, and so I have to write. I've written some really specific things that are very conducive to his style of playing and of music. That I wouldn't write that for like John Fedjock, the trombonist. He would be something I write totally something different. And I enjoy trying to like see what I can do for different folks. It's like it's my music, but it's their music as well. And so I want to let them shine, but also just also acknowledge where they're coming from and hopefully respect their sound and their playing. It's a challenge for sure, but it's a fun thing to do.
I love that that's your approach. And I think there are a couple names, if you're listening, if you haven't heard Sean Jones or George Garzon, you can add that to your list of people you'll look up to listen to. And then maybe if you're in Boston, go to the Regatta Bar. And then now you've done your homework and you can hear the way that sound translates into this new music. It reminds me, Hein, of this. I studied with this cellist, Aldo Paraso at Yale. And he Villalobos wrote for him, and he had this great comment along the lines of yours. So Villalobos had that same attitude that you had, where he really wanted to write for a person who played an instrument, not write for an instrument and then have someone else play it, right? And but he got fed up in his older years, apparently, that players could not accurately describe their own sound. And so Mr. Paraso told me that Villalobos got to the point where he would make you live with him and practice in his apartment in New York. So you had to move in. And then he would listen to you when you didn't know that he was listening to you. Because at that time, that was many decades ago, right? And so you couldn't do what you're doing, which is gathering all these different records, right? And then he would write for you. And then Mr. Pierce was like, it was the greatest thing for me because I really understood my own sound in a different way through that collaboration. So I love that you are committed to that, like working with the person in real time, but then also taking some time and listening to their recordings. And I'm wondering if you've ever noticed that, if there are things that you've brought up to people that kind of delighted them or surprised them that you found in their sound.
I mean, I I have a piece on my last album called Three and Me, and this was very challenging, and it was having the three guest artists on the same track who don't play together normally, you know? So it was John Fedchuk on trombone, Sean Jones on trumpet, and George Garzone on tenor, and so I had to derive three different types of solo sections, and yet fit within the piece. And so I felt really happy about it because they all seemed to gravitate towards their solo sections, and also gravitate towards playing the whole thing together. And it came out, I think, really, really, really nice. It's one of the things that I get to share with my students and talking about, like, you can't just run through the changes for everybody at this. You gotta set these people up to succeed, but yet still be a part of your composition. It's not like here the slashes go. It's like, what does it have to do with this? Is a Brookmeyer thing. It's like, is it time to bring in the soloist, and how is the soloist contributing to your piece, and what are you letting the soloist know that this is how they can be a part of it? He did not want you to just. It's not a chat, as we say around here. Um, so yeah, I mean, I feel very lucky. I've not had. I don't think I've really had negative feedback in terms of how I portray an artist, if you will. So I feel pretty lucky in that. I will say though that the other challenge, and something I'm a little bit more mindful now, is equity in middle school, high school situations. And so my first medium big band commission was a real fun thing. I named it after Notorious RBG and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And the thing is, the fact that I had to write for these this medium level grade, and yet I didn't want it to be like an F blues, and just like into some riff. I wanted them to have something new, and so to put something that is new and yet accessible. And then now coming to another point of realization that not all schools have instrumentation that allows them to play this music. And so I've started to I've got a big project coming up, but that's hopefully this fall, and trying to write one piece for medium, then an advanced version of that, then a lead sheet version of that, and then a three-horn version of that. And then making sure that they have parts for everything: bassoon, French horn, flute, because they're not normally in jazz, but why can't they play jazz if they want to? So that's a whole different thing from personalizing. It's more, it's like jazz for everybody,
I
if you
love
will.
this. Yeah, so it kind of maybe leads me into the next question, which is, you've chosen to serve Berklee as a chair, assistant chair, and this semester acting chair while George Russell's on sabbatical. And so in some ways, it's a different expression of your creative energy, and it's definitely a lot of your time. And I'm just wondering if you could share a couple things, like, was it this idea in part of like helping more people have access to this music and the way they learn it? Is that what attracted you to this kind of position?
Yeah, I mean, the history of harmony and jazz composition was that jazz composition merged into harmony in 2018. And with this merge, and of course, after a year, we're like getting back on our feet, 2019, and then oops, there was a pandemic. So there was never really sort of the ground level, if you will, of the jazz composition major and how it exists within the harmony department. and trying to get that going. And I have I had taught a lot of the courses of the core, not just in jazz comp, but also in the harmony core. And so I wanted to sort of help out, not help out, but I help out a lot. It's a pretty maternal instinct. But I wanted to sort of like have us keep our legacy and also have us progress. And also having us being relevant in jazz and jazz composition. Again, so that's part of it. I love helping people. Whether, my joke is like, I will like open a door like to a meeting or something. I'm like, I'm the assistant chair. I'm here to assist, or like literally. So yeah, I mean, that's definitely that. There's a different scope as a faculty member, and I know Sheryl, you can relate to this. Like your scope as a faculty member is teaching, and this is awesome. You're ground zero. You're with our students. That's absolutely it. But as you all know, as a chair, we see things in a much larger capacity. And even just the fact that but we still also are so siloed. I mean, I felt very lucky last summer to be able to come over to your office and notice your couch, but we had to have a conversation with you about, about certain items. But the fact of the matter that we only see each other maybe if we do once a month, and then we're back to our little, our little holes, if you will, and then we come back out. But I feel also like I've already reached over to the performance division, over the ensembles, with regards to a course that we have that we should have 2 course codes for. Like that's something as a faculty member I couldn't see, and this is something that's only going to help all our students.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know. I mean, I think that hopefully now that we're more post-pandemic, we can walk around more again and, kind of lead by walking around and make that more of our day. It's kind of, we're all getting back into the world in a different way. So that's a good reminder of all that stuff. Hey, Sheryl, what's on your mind at this point in the hang?
Wow. I mean, so many things. I was just thinking about you writing for in your thoughts and what you learned from Brookmeyer about writing for others, and then also thinking about the excitement of coming to Berklee, which was an earlier conversation. And for myself, I have always been obsessed with harmony. I come from a family of church organists and piano players and stuff. So. And as a guitarist, I'm always saying to my students, this is our secret weapon. And the more that you know about it, it's so powerful. And so many guitarists don't really know. So we're here helping them. But to me, that was the most exciting thing about coming to Berklee, because I knew there were, I would just come, I hear these patterns, and I know there's a, and when I learned about, and to me, I really believe deep in my bones that Berklee teaches harmony the best of any place ever, harmonic analysis. And, I can meet any Berklee alum from any era and just sit down and start talking about contiguous 2/5s. And I'm happy. I'm like, oh yeah, that's my thing. And so now we have students, obviously, from all backgrounds that aren't necessarily jazz students. And they get really intimidated by a lot of this stuff, and maybe a lot of the music they listen to isn't that harmonically rich or diverse. But so I want to bring this forward to your mastery as a composer and a writer. My approach to these students is and I know many of my students will not become jazz players, but what you learn about song form and harmony, if you can analyze all the Cole Porter tunes and, Jerome, like just those standards, and then, any of the jazz related bebop stuff, your understanding of harmony, and it gets so deep that will inform all your decisions moving forward. It'll develop your ears, it'll develop your mind. So, when you get to, if you're a writer, at least for me, I'm like, I have that 8 bars that's just magic. And I'm like, oh, now what do? I have so much technique and understanding of like, well, I can modulate up a major third and work my way down. if I just need to write something. And so I learned that through harmonic analysis, definitely at Berklee. I loved it. So, but you can only write on the level where you are, and in terms of understanding that stuff. And that's, I guess, the thing is to try to impress on students is that, you might not think, and I think you said something about this earlier, you might not think this is important to you. And again, I'm not expecting everybody's going to be the next Keith Jarrett or even whatever. They're going to do their thing that might not be related to jazz or whatever. But to understand harmony in that way is going to inform everything. It builds your instinct so that when you're writing, you have developed this big, it's like the big ocean. You got this big ocean that you can pull stuff out of, and for those times when the inspiration isn't there. But so I don't know, I just your thoughts on that. But when you're talking about the way you're writing and considering different soloists and how you're going to approach it, that comes from such a deep understanding of how all that stuff comes together.
I mean, yeah, so I was talking mainly on the jazz composers, and and if I'm going to be, if we were talking about Berklee, then obviously those in the major. But one of the things I think that is really awesome about here is we do have they have to take up to Harmony 4. And you're talking about contiguous 2/5s. That just made me laugh so hard. But the thing that is great, and particularly our faculty knowing the diverse group of students that we have to service, and even though that this harmony came from a jazz tradition, it's still relevant today in non-jazz world, and you can be cool, if you decide to use this stuff. I did sub out a class for an emergency last week, and it was an entering harmony 2, and I used a Billie Eilish tune. And it had, it had major 7 chords. It had the secondary dominance. It had modal interchangeable chords. It had like a 4 minor in it. I think that's exactly what we teach here, And this isn't like, this isn't in 1935 or whatever. It's 2024, and this is something very, 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 like current, And so this stuff does exist. And you can use it as a tool. Now, maybe initially it's difficult to understand, but on the other hand, you've only been working on this for 2 years. You can take the stuff later on and be like, I get it. Oh, that's what it is. Like all of a sudden you're like listening to like this Bruno Mars tune. You're like, wait a second. There's like, he's using like 4 minor there. That comes from the parallel minor key, and you're like, boom! It like suddenly that little light goes off. And again, the faculty here are doing such a great job. We have this massive like Google Drive situation where people keep putting tunes up there. We're also trying to make sure that we also diversify. We're looking like women composers, non-binary bands, like all sorts of genres, everything, even non-Western music, because we really, really want to be current, progressive, and yet in some way show like, hey, music is universal, And I will say this, and I don't know how to pronounce it, but Laufey, I'm not sure. It's Laufey, but she was in my class, and she's very hip now. But she was in my Harmony 4 class, and I'm like, I taught her a little bit, but she knew a lot anyways. It doesn't matter. But I could say, yeah, she did page 72 very well in the supplements. I have a copy of it.
Yes, she did. She just did a Tiny Desk concert, and so everyone should look that up. It's really fantastic, and one of the students came in with it the other day. So that's great. That's really cool that she came up. But that's right? Like, I think this is the thing. Like, I said this one time in an interview, and now I keep saying it. Like, you have to go deep to be free. And this idea that like, oh, I'm not going to study the tradition because it's not modern. Well, if you really study the tradition and you study your craft on the instrument or as a composer or arranger or all of the above, then you have so many interesting things to draw on that make your modern music sound surprising, and it balances that expectation and surprise, and you never know what comes out of it. Because I think one thing that happens, and I don't know how you feel about this, our students, a lot of them are working professionally, or they've started young, like as we did. And there's this misconception that if that's true, then this is not a beginning. This is like a finishing school, as opposed to the beginning of your deeper education that you will carry into the rest of your life. Like, I think it surprises some of our students to know that, Sheryl and I are still taking lessons from dual partners and learning new things. And so are you. That idea that, yes, you're going to learn all of this stuff, and it might feel like this huge information wave. And then 5 years from now, long after you're out of here, you'll go, oh, that. And then you go back to it, and you're going to learn again in a different context. Like, how do you help people kind of grasp and understand and value that it's a real wonderful thing to be a student, and then you're going to be a student throughout your professional career?
I think the mirror of it for me, it's looking at like where we go MAT, which is kind of the Harmony 1 and writing skills combined, and then all the way through Harmony 4. And the funny thing is, when you start off, everything's very concrete. There's no denying how the key signature should be spelled. There's no denying that these are, how like an A minor 7 chord is spelled, what notes go into it. Then you get into like secondary dominance, like, okay, there's a little chromaticism. And then you get into like Harmony 3, where all of a sudden there's this like modal stuff happening and chord scales, whatever. And it's getting way more chromatic. And then all of a sudden in Harmony 4, like, it gets destroyed. And the problem that happens, especially when they get in other areas, you have options. What decisions can you make? Like, do I want to use this scale? But this scale works too. I could use this chord. I could use like 4 other chords, And so the tricky part about it is that the more you learn, it's almost the more you realize you don't know. And I think that's why we keep studying. and I don't know any profession that does not happen to, where you always are constantly having to learn or relearn. If you don't, then you're just going to get left behind, to be perfectly honest. If you don't have that open mind, and if you don't have that little bit sense of humbleness that everything else is a lot bigger than you, and that and there's going to be somebody that always knows more than you, or something that we all never knew. I always like going on the internet, and like suddenly like they show like the Hubble telescope, like, or the newer telescopes, and they're like, this is a whole new universe. I'm like, what? Or even things within our body, like you're like, wow, I didn't know like that tiny little atom does that, or whatever, protein, or into the depths of into the depths of the sea and the ocean. So there's so much unknown out there. And again, the more that you're hungry for that and wanting to have more knowledge, the more that you realize you're like, wow, I don't know. And so the constant, I think, and that's just how it's going to be, if that's what I mean, I guess ignorance is bliss, but then again, with ignorance, you will not go anywhere. So.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because sometimes people feel like, I'm just going to hang on and only do what I feel comfortable with, and that's strength. But actually, the true strength is being comfortable outside of your comfort zone. And that's what gives you real strength in this business, I think, for sure. Ben, this is the perfect time for you. And so Ben has a question he asks every Coffee Talk guest. And also in this particular case, Ben, you might want to run with your time, because you've had a really more recent and interesting relationship with the core at Berklee that's fed into your professional career sense. So you take it wherever you want to take it.
Yeah, I think we'll just to kind of comment on the last conversation. It's kind of like that saying, when you're green, you grow. When you're ripe, you rot. So you just want to make sure to keep, there's always, keep yourself green. Keep yourself, trying to always grow. But yeah, the question that we ask all of our guests would be, what is the question that you think students should be asking right now that they're not thinking about asking?
Not at all on the spot. I mean, it's funny that you're asking that because I literally am not looking at my emails. There are lots of questions that they shouldn't be asking right now. But I'm like, if you go to this website, you'll find the answer. But I don't know. I think if I'm thinking about, this is a new semester, and a lot of the students are right now in a place where maybe they're with a faculty member they're not familiar with, or a course they've never taken in a completely different way. And a lot of them are like immediate reaction, I think, are like, I can't do this, or this isn't the place for me. And so I think they, instead of that, right, try to take a deep breath and sit down and just be calm for a minute and say, what resources do I have to help me through this? If it's a teacher that suddenly was just not what I was expecting, have you actually communicated with them first? And because I can tell you, our faculty is amazing, and while maybe in front of 15 people they give a certain impression, but if you go up to them and say, hi, this is something that's not very familiar for me, and this is what I normally do. Are there resources, or can we have a conversation in which I can understand you? Because I think a lot of times we are very reactionary. But if you take a minute and just like, okay, I'm not going to react. I'm going to just sit down and I'm going to be like, okay, how can I sort through this? How can I problem solve this? What are possible solutions versus like, this sucks? And I think that's the question that most people don't ask. Everyone just kind of reacts. So I think, especially at this time of year where we're just starting and, ad drop is going on, and you're like, I'm not going to pass this class. I'm like, no, hold on there. You got to this level for a certain reason. Just because it's fresh and new, it doesn't mean that it's undoable, So sit down for a minute, take a second. What are your resources? How can I make it through this? And where can I find support?
We have started on going through this very mindset with the incoming students. Sheryl and I started about a year ago, of trying to ask people to adopt more of a leadership mindset regardless of their role, so that you can see this kind of thing, just like you're saying, like take a little leadership and ownership of your education. So when you walk in a classroom and you feel uncomfortable, instead of making it an adversarial situation, say like, okay, this class is required for my degree because people who have gone before me think it's important. And if it's unfamiliar, do you have the courage and the confidence to do exactly what you suggested, to go up to the teacher and say, some things you covered were unfamiliar to me. Could you please help me? And of course, they're going to say yes. It's very different than sitting in the back of the room or not showing up for a month and then saying this class sucks and I hate it. And you know what I mean? It's your fault that I didn't understand it. Then that's a very different conversation. And when you're calm before the semester begins, it's easy to see the difference between those two types of conversations. In the moment, you're right. When you're reacting, it really feels like option B might actually be a road you could go down. And we all know in the professional world, that's not a road you could go down. And even a young professional would say, yeah, of course not. I would never approach a band leader like that. And then to look at, well, okay, and being in the classroom is actually part of your professional development, and look at it that way, Yeah. Ben, you've been a model for a lot of students who come into our office, because when you came to Berklee, you were a very strong player and you had been working, and you had to really dig deep in some of the ways that Ayn is describing with the core. And now you're in a position where I think you've seen how that's paid off in your playing and your career with your band, but then also now you're talking with students who are coming in the office who are younger. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Sure. Yeah. I came from Central Massachusetts, where the high school I went to had no music program or anything like that. And I took guitar lessons. I had an awesome teacher, but I didn't really have a lot of the kind of the core music foundation that uh, every musician should know. A lot of it was kind of my own, just not really putting the time in that I should have, in high school, trying to kind of search out things, because I was gigging since I was like 15. But when I came to Berklee, it was kind of, I call it, my Berklee moment, because I feel like everyone, every student kind of has that Berklee moment where you kind of realize, all right, now's the time I got to step up. This is really where it gets challenging. And for me, was really specifically what was with reading music. I wasn't literate. I understood theory, to an extent before coming here, but I just didn't have the literacy part of it. And that was kind of the moment where I was like, all right, you can either just kind of get discouraged and give up. It's like, but the question that I would always ask myself is like, all right, like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? But in a good way, like, this is something I want to do. So it started in my first semester here, with my level 1 ear training, where I just got, I think partially I just got so in my own head, like, I don't know how to do any of this. And I was seeing the teacher every week for office hours, and I'd never heard of solfege before, other than Sound of Music movie. So it was just, I was just getting really overwhelmed from multiple fronts. So finally the teacher and I both agreed that it would probably be in my best interest to withdraw from the class, as far as GPA goes and all that. But I opted to still audit the class every week, even though after I withdrew, I still showed up every week, and just to try to take in as much information as I could. And then from there, I got put into which I'm assuming Berklee still has this program. I'm not sure, but the second semester success program. So anyone that either fails or withdraws from any of the level 1 core music gets put in this second semester success program. And from there, that's kind of where I really just wanted to prove it to myself, but prove it to everyone else. Like, all right, like I can do this, and I don't care if I have to work, 3 times as hard as the student next to me to get the same result. Like, I'll just do what I have to do. And I was going to tutoring. I was going to every office hour I could, and then by the time I was done with my core music, which was my 4th and 5th semesters, I had actually became a core music tutor myself, helping out other students, just trying to trying to kind of pass it along a bit. And then Julia, the coordinator at this time, then stole me from the core music tutoring, and I started working as a guitar work study. But yeah, and I learned pretty fast too, in with my band and in my career as a player, that everything that you learn, it's not going to take anything away. It's only going to make you better. And especially when it comes to theory, and I find with a lot of the students that I teach outside of Berklee, and being a rock guitar player, I see it in a lot of my students that kind of have this misconception of, well, I don't want to learn theory because it's rules, and I'm an artist and I don't want to learn rules. And I try to explain to them, theory isn't rules of what you should be doing. It's an explanation of why music works, and the more you know, the more you can manipulate that to be able to be a better artist and be. And it's like being a painter and only painting with 2 colors. Would you rather have 2 colors to paint with, or would you rather have 20 colors to paint with? And everything just makes you better. You're not going to take anything away from yourself as an artist.
And I saw your eyes when Ben made a few of those comments. So I wonder if you have any final thoughts of advice this hour to share with students who might have that kind of sense or fear of theory and harmony.
I love your story, Ben. I mean, that's a testament to, I think, you and actually the fact that you withdrew, that you had to withdraw, and because it was just too much. Yet here you are, a success Berklee graduate, and you managed to get the information to become the musician that you are today, and also an educator. I mean, that's fantastic. And I think that is this, we're very unique in that sense. We have it's slightly different than the second semester success, but we do have like music fundamentals and things like that in both ear training and in harmony, and that you can come here as a musician without any traditional knowledge, if you will, in training, and we will make sure you will succeed. We'll give you as many of the tools. And I think one of my favorite stories is that I currently have a faculty member who came to Berklee without and had gone to like different colleges or whatever it is, and wasn't given the chance, and now is teaching here in my department. And he took the harmony classes with me, and he said that he just soaked up as much as possible, and he was just glad to have the opportunity. He's opened a music school with his wife, and he's teaching at Berklee and somebody who didn't have that experience. Again, it's like we're not here for just one type of student. We have such a huge, diverse population in all sorts of ways, and that includes our diversity in terms of genre, our diversity in terms of non-Western music, and we will help you as much as possible to succeed, because we believe in your potential. And don't be afraid. Like, just because you don't know something doesn't mean you can't learn it. We will figure out a way to get your learn on, if you will, and that's what we're here for. To give you a chance. So don't be afraid if you don't know something. It doesn't mean you can't learn it. And I'll also say, the last thing I will say is that it doesn't have to be somebody just coming out of high school. I mean, we've had people with second careers coming here. They're like, you know what? I want to try this music thing. And and they've already been in their 30s, 40s, whatever it is. And it's a beautiful thing. I'm just always I feel so lucky to be in this environment of such diversity in so many different ways.
That's so true. And it's a great point to make, Ein, because also this is our first coffee talk of the 2024 season. There's a lot of entry points for you, and we really respect them all equally. We have the on the ground Berklee College entry point. We have the online entry point. There's programs and master classes and summer programs and all kinds of campuses all over the world with global programs. So find a great entry point. And also, because of stories like Ben's, that was part of the reason why we created our book, which is a real representation and guide to our curriculum as guitarists here at Berklee. It's called Berklee Guitar Theory. You can get it through Hal Leonard. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it at the bookstore here. And so you can do a lot of pre-work if you want to. We'll accept you and work with you, as Ein is saying, however you come in. But there's also a lot more resources now because of the way people have come in and joined us, where we've put our heads together and said, hey, what would be nice for people if they want to get to know what some of the curriculum is like? And there's a lot of accessible books and things you can get in digital copies or in hard copies. So give those a try, and also follow us on social media, and we'll direct you to a lot of those resources. So those are great points to make, and welcoming everybody again into the big Berklee Guitar Department and the big Berklee. Sheryl, this has been such an awesome hour, and I'm wondering if there's something on your mind as we're kind of wrapping up our pot of coffee and tea with Ein.
Yeah, well, once again, great episode. And you're going to make my job hard to edit to find the little teaser in the conversation. Thanks. But what I really want to do, because I know you're a big foodie, is now we have to have food talk and have you back. And you're going to hip us to like every excellent restaurant and excellent recipe. And that's really the conversation, actually, I really want to have.
I will confess to you that sometimes when I teach, and we're past midterms and people are just like, oh my gosh. And so literally with the students, I remember showing them, my Italian friend sent me this video on how to make gnocchi, and everyone's like, no, oh my gosh, and so really funny. And but the other thing too that I have done was like, why are you buying that pre-processed pasta sauce? So one time I remember, and there, it's cheaper if you can make a batch, you can freeze part of it, and they're done for the week. So I gave them a very simple marinara recipe, and like save you money. So I'm here to assist in many different ways, but absolutely with the food thing, I would definitely welcome that. I'll bring some samples. Uh,
Yeah, I love this because when all of you go and do your homework and look up all these names, when you follow Ein, you not only get great music, but she does often share the food. I'm just throwing that out there, everybody. It's like you could learn a lot about harmony and arranging and jazz and pasta and all kinds of amazing food. So that's a plug for doing your homework. Ben, what about you? Last thoughts on your mind?
I think this was a great conversation on so many different levels for incoming students, for students, returning students, of just kind of the mindset of, just do what you need to do to get the job done, and being able to take the leadership role, to be able to find any resources you need to use to be able to be successful as a student here.
Well, thank you so much, Ein. We really loved having you as our guest today. And finally, we get to have a cup of coffee with you with everything going on. So this was great. So thank you so much for being with us. Thank you, Sheryl Bailey. Thank you, Ben Cody. And we're going to keep hanging out and finish this mug of coffee together, the four of us. But we'll be with all of the rest of you again on the next Coffee Talk. Have a great week, everyone.